The wilderness holds its secrets with an iron grip, but sometimes, just sometimes, those secrets claw their way back to the surface. 8 years ago, a seasoned mountain explorer stepped through the towering gates of Yosemite National Park and dissolved into the Sierra Nevada like morning fog. No remains discovered, no breadcrumbs left behind, no explanations offered. Then last month, a group of ham radio enthusiasts camping beside the mirror-black waters of Tenaya Lake intercepted a transmission that would resurrect this frozen mystery from its grave. The digital clock glowed 11:47 p.m. when Tom Bradley's ears first caught it. A fragile voice piercing through the electronic snow. An SOS beacon bleeding through the emergency airwaves, transmitted in calculated, methodical pulses. Dot, dash, dash, dash. Then a string of numbers that would make his heart skip. Coordinates pleading through the darkness. Help 377459 US 109-5332. The haunting refrain echoed across the frequencies. Help 37.7459 US 109-5332. 4 minutes of silence. Then the ghostly message would resurrect itself, as reliable as a digital heartbeat. Tom's fingers fumbled with his GPS unit, adrenaline making his hands shake as he decoded the mysterious location. The signal originated somewhere in Half Dome's shadow, buried within the backcountry where civilization's reach ends, where asphalt surrenders to ancient stone. But what froze the blood in Tom's veins wasn't just the coordinates themselves, it was their impossible nature. The numbers pinpointed a place that existed in no official cartography, a location that defied every government survey. How does a human soul evaporate without leaving so much as a whisper in America's most surveilled wilderness sanctuary? And what force would cause their cry for salvation to pierce the void only after 8 years of absolute silence? The Vanishing. September 15, 2016. Dawn's ethereal veil still embraced Yosemite's granite titans as Michael Patterson secured his expedition pack for what appeared to be an ordinary 4-day solo pilgrimage to Half Dome. Michael defied every stereotype of the reckless adventurer. This 34-year-old systems architect from San Jose had spent over 15 years reading these mountain faces like familiar books. An Eagle Scout whose wilderness intuition could decipher topographical charts as easily as city streets. He'd conquered countless remote expeditions. His circle described him as systematic, cautious, the type who packed triple redundancy for every survival tool, and religiously submitted comprehensive itineraries to park authorities. Yet that September dawn carried an ominous undercurrent. His former spouse, Jennifer, would eventually reveal to investigators that Michael's behavior had shifted dramatically in the weeks preceding his disappearance. Paranoid didn't begin to capture it, she explained. He'd developed an obsession with his rearview mirror during drives, convinced invisible pursuers shadowed his every movement, demanding their divorce negotiations occur only in crowded public venues. I assumed it was separation anxiety manifesting, Jennifer confessed to the detective. Michael had always been so analytical, so anchored to reality. I never conceived. Her voice cracked, unable to complete the thought. Michael's wilderness permit documented a conventional route, the mist trail ascending to Little Yosemite Valley for his inaugural night's camp. Standard pathway, heavily trafficked, theoretically secure. The final confirmed evidence emerged from tourist snapshots captured at Glacier Point Overlook, time-stamped 2:47 p.m. Michael appeared as a background figure in a family's vacation memories, studying his map beside the scenic platform. Beyond that moment, Michael Patterson effectively ceased to exist. 3 days elapsed before authorities located his metallic silver Honda Accord at the Half Dome trailhead parking area, morning condensation coating its windshield like tears. Vehicle inspection revealed his wallet, phone charger, and backup clothing methodically arranged in the rear seat. His hiking equipment had vanished with him. The discovery that confounded everyone was what remained behind. His emergency satellite communicator still factory sealed on the dashboard. For a veteran wilderness navigator to abandon his electronic lifeline defied all logic. The hunt. The search operation for Michael Patterson evolved into Yosemite's most extensive missing person mobilization in recorded history. For 10 grueling days, Over 150 civilian volunteers systematically dissected 200 square miles of untamed terrain. Helicopters carved geometric patterns across granite peaks. Thermal imaging technology probed forest floors while tracking dogs pursued phantom scent trails that dissolved into nothingness. Sarah Patterson, Michael's mother, maintained vigil at the command station every sunrise, her features carved with the specific torment reserved for parents whose children have been swallowed by the unknown. "Someone possesses knowledge," she implored gathered media representatives. Human beings don't simply evaporate into nothingness. Yet the ancient peaks seemed determined to contradict her faith. Day 7 delivered what appeared to be salvation. A search canine named Rex signaled urgently near the Merced River approximately 2 miles downstream from the mist trail. There, imprisoned between river stones, rescue teams recovered a solitary hiking boot, size 10.5, identical brand Michael wore, with tread patterns matching photographs from his residence. This evidence electrified the search effort. Teams concentrated their resources along the waterway, operating under the hypothesis that Michael had stumbled, plummeted, and been carried downstream by the current. Diving specialists examined every pool capable of concealing remains. Ground units scrutinized every fallen timber that might entrap a victim. They discovered absolutely nothing. As days accumulated, base camp morale deteriorated steadily. Park Ranger Lisa Chin, who orchestrated the search, later acknowledged her growing skepticism. "The boot felt artificially placed," she admitted during a 2018 interview. "Too pristine, positioned too conveniently, but physical evidence demanded investigation." By day 10, approaching winter storms and depleted resources forced the official search termination. Michael Patterson received the designation of presumed deceased, another sacrifice to wilderness that guards its mysteries jealously, if it surrenders them at all. That boot would ultimately prove the investigation's greatest deception. Search teams remained oblivious that someone had monitored their every action, someone who knew Michael's exact location and possessed compelling reasons to ensure he would never be recovered. The investigation 3 months following Michael's disappearance, his parents contracted private investigator Marcus Webb. Webb had dedicated 20 years to FBI service before establishing his independent practice specializing in abandoned cases. His experience had taught him to recognize when evidence patterns felt wrong. "The timeline troubled me profoundly," Webb later testified. "Seasoned hikers don't vanish on popular trails during daylight hours, and they absolutely don't abandon emergency beacons in their vehicles." Webb initiated from ground zero, re-interviewing everyone who'd contacted Michael during the weeks before his disappearance. These conversations revealed a disturbing behavioral pattern. Michael's colleague, Dave Nick, mentioned Michael's recent habit of working late hours, claiming his apartment felt compromised. His divorce attorney, Robert Hayes, noted Michael's request to relocate their meetings from Hayes' office to a bustling downtown coffee shop, explaining he couldn't trust people with building access. Most unsettling was Webb's discovery through Jennifer, Michael's ex-wife. During their final conversation, Michael had confided that someone in a Park Service uniform was surveilling him. "I dismissed his concerns as ridiculous," Jennifer sobbed. "I labeled him paranoid, claimed stress was affecting his judgment. What if I was mistaken? What if someone genuinely was watching him?" Webb requested complete Park Service employee schedules from the period surrounding Michael's disappearance. His findings sent ice through his veins. Unexplained gaps appeared, mysterious absences, radio logs that contradicted official duty assignments. Most suspicious, security camera footage from the main park entrance showed a 6-hour malfunction window on September 15th, 6 hours that perfectly encompassed Michael's park entry time frame. Webb's most chilling revelation emerged from interviewing other families of missing hikers. During the previous 5 years, 7 solo hikers had vanished in Yosemite. All experienced, all on established trails, all carrying minimal cash but expensive equipment. Someone was hunting them, Webb concluded in his report, and that someone possessed insider access to park operations. He couldn't have known his investigation would hibernate for 8 long years. Truth lay buried too deep, concealed too skillfully, protected by someone wearing authority's badge. But mountains remember everything, and eventually they demand justice. The resurrection signal, August 12, 2024. Tom Bradley and 6 members of the San Francisco Amateur Radio Club had anticipated this camping expedition for months. Their annual pilgrimage to Tenaya Lake combined recreation with emergency preparedness training. They'd constructed a temporary communication station for disaster response protocol practice, antennas reaching toward stars above granite peaks. Nobody anticipated stumbling upon Yosemite's most significant cold case breakthrough in history. Just past midnight, the signal first penetrated static on frequency 146.52 MHz, the national calling frequency for amateur radio operators. Tom had been monitoring bands habitually when the weak transmission seized his attention. Help 37.7459 US 1195332. Help 37.7459 US 119995332. The message repeated every 4 minutes with mechanical precision. Tom rapidly plotted coordinates on his GPS unit, excitement building as he realized they indicated somewhere within Half Dome Wilderness area. "Guys, you must hear this." Tom summoned his camping companions. Within minutes, all 6 operators clustered around the radio, listening to what sounded like a specter crying from the mountains. By dawn, they'd contacted park rangers. By noon, a search and rescue team was trekking toward the coordinates, following GPS waypoints into terrain that appeared on no official trail maps. The coordinates led them to a granite depression, hidden behind natural rock formations that had concealed it from casual observation for decades. Initially, the rescue squad detected nothing out of the ordinary. Then, Expedition Commander Captain Ross Morrison spotted something that transformed his circulation into liquid ice. Recent gouges scarred the granite surface. Implement markings. Someone had labored at this location within recent memory. 4 grueling hours of methodical excavation exposed the devastating reality. Camouflaged beneath scattered stones and natural wreckage lay the mouth of a constricted cave network, scarcely wide enough for human crawling passage. The opening bore evidence of intentional disguise. Boulders positioned with calculated naturalness, yet actually barricading entry to whatever nightmares waited within. Their discovery inside would metamorphose Michael Patterson's missing person investigation into something infinitely more malevolent. The cavern penetrated approximately 40 feet into the mountainside, terminating in a compact chamber roughly equivalent to a bedroom's dimensions. The atmosphere within remained stagnant yet breathable, implying some ventilation pathway to the exterior surface. But the contents filling that chamber rendered the rescue squad's flashlights pathetically insufficient against the encompassing blackness. Equipment: contemporary camping apparatus, electronic devices, sustenance supplies, and hydration containers. Certain items appeared relatively fresh, while other pieces exhibited weathering and exposure damage. Detailed examination disclosed dates stamped on energy bar packaging and water bottles. September 2016, October 2016, December 2016. In the distant corner, partially concealed beneath military surplus canvas, investigators located the origin of the radio transmission that had been wailing across the peaks. A compact yet sophisticated radio transmitter connected to a battery assembly and timing mechanism that triggered the broadcast every 4 minutes. The apparatus was homemade but operational, constructed by someone possessing substantial technical expertise. Fastened to the radio was a handwritten message. The ink had faded but remained readable. "If you're reading this, it means the signal finally penetrated through. My name is Michael Patterson. I've been imprisoned here since September 15th, 2016. David Clark, park maintenance worker, compelled me into this cave and blocked the entrance. He's been stealing supplies from missing hikers for years. Examine employee records. He was present at every search. He knows where the others are located. Please locate my family. Tell them I attempted to return home." The note bore signature and date, October 3rd, 2016. Michael had endured his initial disappearance by more than 14 days. But the most spine-chilling revelation awaited discovery. Concealed behind the radio equipment, investigators uncovered a miniature digital camera SD card enclosed in plastic. The card retained its charge, and the contents would expose the authentic magnitude of horror Michael had unearthed. Captain Morrison's hands trembled as he examined the footage on the camera's tiny LCD display. The videos documented someone entering and exiting the cave routinely, transporting supplies and equipment. Someone wearing a Park Service uniform. Someone whose features were distinctly visible in the harsh LED illumination. David Clark, park maintenance supervisor, 20-year employee, volunteer participant in every major search and rescue mission for the past decade, including the search for Michael Patterson. The Predator Unmasked. Within hours of the cave revelation, FBI operatives were examining David Clark's employment documentation, financial records, and duty schedules. Their findings illustrated the portrait of a man who had transformed his trusted position into predatory operations spanning nearly 10 years. Clark had enlisted with the Park Service in 2008 as a maintenance technician responsible for trail maintenance and facility restoration across wilderness zones. His position provided exceptional access to isolated locations, comprehensive knowledge of hiking behaviors, and most critically, advanced notification of when solitary travelers would be most defenseless. Financial documentation revealed a disturbing sequence. Despite his humble salary, Clark had been depositing regular cash amounts into his banking account for years. The sums corresponded precisely with the resale value of premium hiking equipment reported stolen from missing hikers. But Clark's operation's true magnitude became evident when investigators searched his residence. In a secured shed behind his house, they discovered a warehouse's worth of stolen camping equipment. Tents, sleeping systems, GPS units, cameras, all still displaying the personal markings and modifications belonging to missing hikers. Among the items, investigators found Michael Patterson's distinctive blue Osprey backpack, still containing his personal belongings. His journal, wallet, and family photographs had been left undisturbed, but every piece of valuable equipment had been removed. The journal entries narrated a story of escalating paranoia that hadn't been paranoia whatsoever. In the weeks preceding his disappearance, Michael had recorded several incidents that now assumed sinister new significance. August 28th. Observed the same park maintenance truck 3 times today in different locations. Driver seemed to be monitoring me at the visitor's center. September 12th. Decided to modify my hiking route at the last minute. Something doesn't feel right about this trip, but I need to escape and clear my head. Michael's final entry, written the morning of September 15th, was prophetic. If something happens to me on this trip, look for someone with inside access. The coincidences are accumulating. But perhaps the most incriminating evidence was discovered on Clark's work computer. Email records demonstrated that he had illegally accessed hiking permit applications, exploiting his maintenance credentials to identify solo travelers with expensive equipment who would be hiking in remote areas. He'd been stalking them systematically, utilizing his Park Service uniform and authority to earn their confidence before robbing them in locations where their disappearances would resemble hiking accidents. Michael Patterson had been different. Michael had decoded the pattern, and that had made him too dangerous to simply rob and release. The final day, reconstructed FBI investigators collaborating with Park Service Internal Affairs successfully reconstructed the events of Michael Patterson's final day with chilling precision. David Clark, in custody and confronting multiple felony charges, eventually provided a complete confession that filled the remaining gaps. Clark had been monitoring Michael's hiking permit application for weeks, noting that the software engineer would be carrying several $1,000s worth of camera equipment and GPS gear into the wilderness alone. It was intended to be routine, another effortless target for his profitable side enterprise. But Michael Patterson wasn't routine. Clark intercepted Michael at Glacier Point around 3 p.m., just after the tourist photographs were captured. Using his Park Service credentials, Clark approached Michael with a fabrication about trail closures and safety concerns on Michael's planned route. He offered to guide Michael to an alternative path that would be safer and more scenic. Michael, despite his growing paranoia, still trusted a uniformed park employee. That trust would cost him everything. Clark led Michael off the main trail, deeper into the wilderness toward the hidden cave system he'd discovered years earlier. The location had become Clark's base of operations, a place to store stolen equipment and conceal evidence of his crimes. But somewhere during that hike, Michael became suspicious. Perhaps it was Clark's nervousness or the route that led nowhere near any official trail. Michael confronted Clark about the string of missing hikers, revealing that he'd been researching the disappearances and had identified troubling patterns. He knew too much, Clark confessed to investigators. He started asking about other missing hikers, about why I'd volunteered for so many searches. He said he was going to report his suspicions to the FBI. Clark panicked. Instead of simply robbing Michael and vanishing, he forced the hiker at gunpoint into the cave system. Clark's plan was to hold Michael temporarily while he figured out how to handle the situation without exposing his entire operation. Michael, an experienced Eagle Scout, immediately comprehended his predicament. While Clark was distracted with moving equipment, Michael managed to establish a makeshift radio beacon using Clark's own communication equipment. His technical background allowed him to jury-rig a transmitter and program it to broadcast a distress signal on amateur radio frequencies. But the signal was weak, barely powerful enough to reach beyond the surrounding granite peaks. For years, atmospheric conditions and the cave's location prevented the transmission from reaching any receivers. Clark returned to the cave the next morning to find Michael working on the radio equipment. In a rage, Clark sealed the cave entrance with rocks and debris, trapping Michael inside with limited food and water. "I didn't mean to kill him," Clark insisted during his confession. "I was going to come back in a few days after the search died down. I was going to let him go somewhere far away, make it look like he'd wandered off and gotten lost." But Clark never returned. The massive search operation made him too nervous to approach the cave, and as days turned to weeks, he convinced himself that Michael must have died naturally. It was easier than admitting he'd committed murder. The 18-day vigil Michael Patterson survived in that cave for 18 days. His journal, recovered with his remains, documented his final weeks in heartbreaking detail. He rationed his limited supplies carefully, continued working on the radio beacon, and held on to hope that someone would eventually hear his cry for help. His last journal entry, dated October 2nd, 2016, read simply, "Signal still broadcasting. Someone will find this someday. Tell my family I love them. Tell them I tried to come home." David Clark's capture unleashed the torrents on National Park Service history's most massive criminal probe. His admission implicated him in 7 supplementary vanishings spanning nearly 10 years, converting frozen cases into dynamic homicide investigations. Clark had refined his methodology through years of experimentation and refinement. He pinpointed solitary hikers carrying premium equipment through his unauthorized access to permit databases. He exploited his maintenance responsibilities to reconnoiter isolated locations, ideal for ambush attacks. Most devastatingly, he enlisted for every significant search and rescue mission, providing him flawless camouflage to supervise investigations and guarantee evidence remained undiscovered. The relatives of vanished hikers who had been informed their beloved ones perished in hiking mishaps now discovered the horrific reality. Jennifer Reeves, whose sibling David had disappeared in 2014, articulated for all of them at a media briefing, "We entrusted the Park Service to locate our family members. We never conceived that one of their own employees was the cause they were missing." Clark's techniques were savagely effective. He would approach isolated hikers in remote territories using his uniform and credentials to secure their confidence. Once separated, he would steal their valuable equipment and in most instances compel them to trek even deeper into the wilderness before abandoning them without supplies or navigation instruments. Most casualties died of exposure within days, their bodies never retrieved in the immense wilderness. Clark had depended on the mountains to conceal his atrocities, and for years, his strategy had functioned flawlessly. But Michael Patterson had been distinctive. Michael possessed training, intelligence, and sufficient technical expertise to improvise a radio beacon from Clark's own equipment. Even imprisoned and dying, Michael had discovered a method to ensure the truth would eventually emerge. The 8-year echo, the radio transmission that amateur operators intercepted in 2024, had been broadcasting continuously for nearly 8 years. Transformations in atmospheric conditions, seasonal weather patterns, and perhaps the shifting of stones around the cave entrance had finally enabled the weak signal to propagate far enough to reach Tom Bradley's receiver at Tenaya Lake. Michael's desperate plea for assistance had required 8 years to find its path out of the mountains, but it had finally reached someone listening. Justice delivered. On March 15, 2025, David Clark pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of robbery, and obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, calling his crimes a betrayal of public trust on an unprecedented scale. Clark's confession led investigators to the locations of 4 additional victims, bringing closure to families who had spent years wondering what happened to their loved ones. 3 victims remain missing, their final resting places known only to the mountains that refused to surrender their secrets. Revolutionary reforms. The National Park Service implemented sweeping reforms in the wake of the scandal. Background checks for employees were strengthened. Equipment inventory systems were digitized to prevent theft, and new protocols required multiple staff members to be present during any interactions with solo hikers in remote areas. Sarah and Robert Patterson, Michael's parents, used the civil settlement from their lawsuit against the Park Service to establish the Michael Patterson Foundation for Hiker Safety. The foundation provides emergency communication devices to solo hikers and trains volunteer radio operators to monitor wilderness emergency frequencies. Michael always believed that technology could save lives, Sarah Patterson said at the foundation's launch. Even in his final days trapped and dying, he was still trying to use technology to help others. His radio beacon didn't just solve his own case. It prevented David Clark from claiming more victims. Heroes in the static. The amateur radio operators who discovered Michael's signal were recognized by Congress for their service. Tom Bradley, who first heard the weak transmission cutting through the static, keeps his radio tuned to emergency frequencies every night. "You never know who might be calling for help," Bradley said. "Michael's signal reminds us that voices crying out in the wilderness deserve to be heard, no matter how long it takes." Final rest and lasting legacy. Michael Patterson's remains were laid to rest in San Jose on a sunny spring morning with full honors from the Park Service he had ultimately helped reform. His gravestone bears a simple inscription chosen by his family. He found a way home. The case remains a landmark in criminal justice history, proving that even the most carefully planned crimes leave traces for those patient enough to look and listen. In the end, it wasn't sophisticated forensics or brilliant detective work that solved the mystery of Michael Patterson's disappearance. It was the persistence of one man's voice crying out from the darkness for 8 long years, waiting for someone to finally hear his call for help. Eternal echoes. The mountains of Yosemite stand eternal and silent, but they remember everything. And sometimes, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the echoes of those who never made it home. In a wilderness where the greatest danger isn't always the terrain, Michael Patterson's story serves as a reminder that trust is precious, betrayal is devastating, and the human spirit's determination to seek justice can outlast even death itself. Sometimes the people we trust to protect us are the ones we should fear most. But sometimes, even from beyond the grave, the victims find a way to speak truth to power and ensure that justice, however delayed, eventually finds its way home.